Welcome to the Storyfield. This is a podcast created and sponsored by the Allen Firm. This is Josh Allen, and I'm joined by Micah Petrie. I think you'll agree that life is complex, business is hard, and living a life of faith can feel complicated. We know it's discouraging when movement in your life or business or faith has stopped. Well, you're in the right place to hear some great stories of normal people just like us who will inspire you to move forward in life. So thank you for joining us. Today, we know you're going to be encouraged. It is a great day today, Storyfield. So we have my friend and really a man with the coolest name ever, if you ask me, on the show. So Barney Paradise, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here, Josh. I will say it's half cool. The last name is cool, but Barney, come on.
Well, your combined is pretty good though, man.
Yeah, but I was expecting, like Rock Paradise or, Stone Cold Paradise, something like that. But
well. It is uniquely you and it's perfect for you. So today I'm sensing the word kind of the show, Barney, is testimony. And not so much in the legal sense that I deal with and we see, but Barney has an incredible and fascinating story, which we're going to be unpacking today. But I wanted to do just a little bit of a short bio on you first. You've been married 27 years to an amazing wife.
Mm-hmm.
You have 3 grown children, 2 of which serve in the military and 1 serves as a paramedic and firefighter. I know you're proud of the service.
Definitely am.
And you are a grandfather to 10 grandchildren, which is going to be fun for us, hopefully one day.
I know you look at me and I look like 37 and you're like, how can it be? But...
Well, it just sneaks up on us. Well, currently you're serving at Gateway Church in the role of Director of Campus Development. And you're working with a team who plans, manages, maintains 10 church campuses, plus preparing for future growth. So we can't wait to dive into that, Barney. You're a mountain biker, an outdoor man, and a business operations expert is what I would call you. So is that a fair introduction?
I think it is. I'm hoping to put semi-excellent fly fisherman on my resume here soon.
We can help you with that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, so we usually start kind of a linear, life path, but for you, I want to start with, let's talk about Gateway for a minute. Let's talk about who Gateway is, your role, and then I want to backtrack to your childhood. Can you bring me current?
Yeah, sure. I've been serving, I should say, and I say serving because it is not work. Being here at Gateway, being called with purpose to this organization. Gateway Church was, I want to say, founded in 2001. I hope my math is correct, but it is just a phenomenal organization led by our senior pastor, Robert Morris. And he is a godly man that has been given vision by God to reach a numerous amount of people, young, old, all types of ethnic makeup. But we're called, his vision is 30,000, 300,000, 3 million, and 300 million worldwide. So you mentioned 10 campuses. We've got a little ways to go. And it's interesting, through the pandemic, we jumped up to the 300,000 mark in viewership. So God can turn something that we thought was not so good into a deliverable that his truth can be delivered. So I'm just excited to be a part of Gateway and serve here. And we've got I'm amazed by our awesome, phenomenal team that he's called to serve here at Gateway. And I get to serve on this wonderful staff, impacting many lives.
So where are the 10 campuses? Are they through Texas solely?
Actually, primarily in Texas. We have 9 here in the Metroplex area and 1 in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So we kind of give guidance remotely for that one.
Okay. And give me just a little idea. I know you guys are planning and building, for the future. What kind of construction just are you involved in right now?
Right now, we're involved in a little bit over $100 million worth of construction projects. We have our Frisco campus and our Dallas campus going through major renovations and additions. So those two campuses are, I hope you don't mind me sharing numbers because I think it gives you a impact of how large they're going to be in the Metroplex area. So those two projects are about $38 million. And then we have a big project that we're getting ready to bring online, which is our main campus, the South Lake expansion, which is going to be about $106 to $108 million in expansion. So, and again, all this growth element is for the well-being or the benefit of community. We also have a campus that we should start breaking ground, and that's our new Justin campus in Justin, Texas, right off Highway 114. And that one's about a $24-25 million project that'll seat approximately 1,000 people, have a great kids ministry area, and just is being dropped in just outside of Justin, the town, but it's really going to meet some community ministry needs. So we're excited about that.
That's fascinating, Barney. And your role as the director of campus development is really just in the middle of all that.
It is in the middle of it, but it's to guide, to initiate direction given by our leadership. But it's also to bring up the team, to really pour into them, to create a whole bunch of mini-me's that we can just grow it together. So whether I'm involved in a meeting or I'm involved in this project, everybody's doing it together. We have a real effort to collaborate and to bring teams together so that we're all understanding how a campus needs to be built. We're looking for the best means and methods to get it built for not a penny more, getting the best product for the money that we have on each and every project that we put our hands on. So this is a real team collaborative effort. And I'm just like one of many that contribute to it. And we have a solid team, some of them. Our good friend Nick with Park Hill architectural firm and Pogue Construction and a bunch of trade partners that we use a method called IPD, a process, and that's integrated project delivery. So we're all teaming up together to get the best product for the money that we have.
That's so good. How exciting. Well, so that's not always been the case. So I just wanted to give listeners just a snapshot of where you're at now, but I want to backtrack. I want to hear what I really think is your testimony. So take us back, but tell us first, for those who may not know, when we use the word testimony in the kind of church sense, like what are we talking about?
Well, I think it's like where we were. A testimony to me is where we were before God, what God has been doing through us, and where we're at now after God. So,
okay. Well, we're current, so take us back. I want to hear your testimony because you used a phrase, Barney, when we were just kind of doing some initial information about Jesus snatched you from the path of destruction. Yeah. So take us back. Where'd you grow up? Tell us your testimony.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a small town in Southern California. It was in the high desert, about an hour and a half north of Los Angeles. There wasn't much to do. I come from a background of alcoholic father, alcoholic grandfather. My mom was kind of the glue that kept us together. Hispanic culture, nature. Both my parents spoke great English and Spanish, but never taught us Spanish. So kind of, I can understand everything that's said, in a conversation, but I'm not able to speak it. So during that time, I was kind of just raised with every other kid, not in a Hispanic culture. Again, it was a small town and there wasn't much to do. And I can remember in elementary school saying, I want to have a good life. I want to be smart, do good in school, and someday go to college. Well, that went great up until about 8th grade. I had straight A's up until 8th grade. and then started hanging around with the wrong crowd and smoking cigarettes and stealing beers from my dad's ice box and stuff like that. And really just like starting to explore and experiment, with this whole thing that I see adults doing and smoking cigarettes and drinking. And interestingly enough, let me back up just a little bit, a few more years before my eighth grade year. And I think I was in fifth grade. I used to love walking along walls, block walls that kind of divided homes and residential areas. And I don't know if it was just being high up and some excitement, of walking up on top of these things. But I used to walk by this church, and the pastor would come out and say hi and everything. And he invited us to a summer camp one year. And I was like, oh, that's great, but we really can't afford it. My family's poor and stuff. He's like, don't worry about it. Let me talk to your parents and we'll get you there. So both my brother and I went to summer camp. My middle brother, and because he was the only one old enough other than me. So that was our first taste of Jesus. I heard about him and I thought, wow, there's somebody who cares that I can't see. And so, we're dealing with a fifth grade mind here. And so I thought I accepted Jesus at that time, but after summer camp, I had no foundational element. There was no other believers that surrounded me that could say, hey, here's your next step, on how Jesus wants to grow your life and how you can be a little bit more founded. And so I just kind of phased out of that. And that brings us into getting into the smoking and alcohol, and hit high school, started doing it a little bit more on weekends. And I'm amazed at some of the things you could get away with back in my day and age. It's like driving around with a 12 pack of beer in the car, and we thought all this was fun. When you look at it back now as a parent and a grandparent, we're like, oh my gosh, what idiots we were. I would, be irate if I found somebody doing that around my kids or my grandkids driving around and endangering their safety. And so lots of things learned through that.
So it sounded like there was a super like clear, mark of like something shifted. Do you think do you think a lot of it had to do, with the people you were hanging out with? It was that clear of a shift?
Um, I think so. I really do. I stopped hanging around. I don't know if you want to call it the smart crowd, but the wise decision makers. And I don't know if this what I thought was cool smoking crowd, gave me a little bit more popularity in this group. But it was that was probably one of the starting poor choices that I made at that time.
It's
And
that important who you hang out with.
it,
Is what I
it
gather
really,
from
it really is. I can recall teaching a fifth and sixth grade class, and they called me in to share a message, and it was I titled it "Poor Choices, Poor Decisions," and I helped them to think about that decision that you're getting ready to make. And if you can imagine me at eighth grade thinking about stepping over into the smoking group, was that the best decision I could make for my life? And that one decision kind of set me on a path spiraling downward. And so, as I mentioned, like, small town, I thought this was a great life. Let's start partying more. Let's start doing drugs more. And ultimately that meant that smoking and drinking led into marijuana use and then cocaine use. By the time I was 16 years old, I was already dealing drugs. And I just thought that was normalcy. And I don't know how many of you out there have seen the movie Scarface. Well, that had a direct impact on me. I wanted to build a drug empire. And I think that's where this entrepreneurial mindset had always been, is like, hey, if I sell this stuff, have a client base, I'm going to make lots of money and do the things in life that I want to do. And that was a very me mentality. And unfortunately, it just, again, I say unfortunately, I'm going to back up and say, it took me down a road that was unfortunate, but Jesus had a different um, direction for me. And so I got heavier involved in drugs. At 19, I felt like, you know what, I really don't think this is healthy for me, and I need to make better decisions. So I decided to join the Navy. And at 19, I joined the Navy and got shipped out to Florida for boot camp. Went to training in Mississippi, and I had graduated in the top 3%. So that was a miracle in itself. For as many drugs I did at a young age, I still had a mind that could think and graduate in the top 3% of my training class. It qualified me for a boost program. And I don't know if you've ever heard of a boost program, but when you get to your first duty station, your CO can nominate you to go to officer candidate school. So I had it set, it's like, great. All I have to do is get to my first duty station, continue, doing a great job in service to our country. And then I was going to get to choose a university of my choice and then go to officer candidate school. Man, I have my career set. Well, I got stationed in my hometown.
Oh no.
So talk about wrong crowd, I was back in it. And there's an interesting message here you'll see is, so I got back and recognized, gosh, I can make better money selling to the sailors than I can working for the government. So I started dealing drugs again and partying, and ultimately that led into a 2-week binge, and I went AWOL, recognized I messed up, went back to the Navy and said, hey, I need help here. I have a problem with drugs. And instead of help, I received punishment. And so spent 90 days in the brig, got half my salary cut. And so it really upset me. I didn't get the help that I was asking for. So I elected to get out of the military and move on. That really never changed after that. I still kept fumbling around and decided to move to a different town about, I don't know, 50, 60 miles away. Started a job, and guess what? Lo and behold, what finds me? Drugs. And not only drugs, but big amounts of drugs, like that I could get my hands on and sell. And so through a series event, I became kind of, I don't know, recognized for the go-to guy to get big quantities. And one of my past acquaintances introduced me to a couple of individuals from the Bay Area that wanted to get their hands on a large quantity of drugs. So after a couple of smaller deals, I arranged for them to get 2 pounds of methamphetamine. And on that day, I was praying to God, because this was my understanding of God. God, help me for this deal to go through, and I will slow down and not do drugs as much. And so I look at that now and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm praying to God like, hey, bless me to distribute evil and corruption and destroy lives, through this drug.
So he answered it a
Yeah.
different way, it sounds like.
He really did. So on that day, May 27th, I want to say it was 1989. No, 1987. Wow, I'm dating myself now. I was busted by the DEA with possession of 2 pounds of methamphetamine. And I found myself looking from behind jail cell bars and recognizing, my goodness, Barney, every decision you have made has led to just an array of hopelessness, of your bad choices, one after the other. And I've given you all kinds of opportunity to go to college, to have good, careers and things like that. And you keep choosing the wrong things. And I finally identified that drugs were not good, that they revolved around all my poor decisions, that this fantasy that I had, I was going to be some ultimate drug dealer with lots of money and things at, my disposal, wasn't going to come true. And so that's when I finally surrendered my life to Jesus. And I reflected back on the time that I heard about him in fifth grade. And I said this prayer. I said, God, I don't expect a miracle. If I'm going to prison, I want to do it with you and I will serve you for the rest of my life because
Mhm.
I was that broken and I was that I acknowledged that I couldn't do it on my own. And so from that day forward, I walked with Jesus, and even through the hardest times, I walked with him. And so that's how I found him, or he
So
found me.
was that whenever, I mean, you were busted from the time you were busted to the time you actually spent time incarcerated?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Like I said, I was busted on that day, May 27th, 1987, and I was looking at 15 to 18 years. And I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I'm 21 years old and I'm going to lose a quarter of my life in incarceration. Fortunately, grace was given to me and I got sentenced to 3 years. And that was because it was in the state of California and they were very lenient on first time drug offenses. So I was grateful, ecstatic. I did my time and I was even blessed during that time. God watched over me. I managed to be involved, stay involved with church. I managed to he used me to influence others, to protect me, to just put a hedge of protection uh, over me and around me in prison. Because I'm telling you guys, prison is no fun place. It is. You just see the worst of the worst, the rotten apples of every group. Everybody says, well, this race or that race or that. No, you know what? Every race has bad people, and I got to see firsthand all of those bad people. And so, um, like I said, I spent about 22, 23 months in prison. I would have got out in 18 months, but I joked with you guys. I was an entrepreneur, so I was always thinking of ways to make things fun and exciting, and bring a little business to the occasion. And so I would do football polls, and say, hey, it cost you 5 top ramen to be in this, because top ramen next to cigarettes was money in there, or it cost you 2 packs to be involved in this football poll. Well, one time they were doing a 3D Stooges 3D event on TV. So I happened to work outside the gates of the main prison in an office environment. So I would bring home manila folders and blue and red plastic and make 3D glasses and then trade them out to all the other inmates and stuff. And so one time I was coming the gates and they patted me down and found this on me and basically gave me an additional 2-month charge for stealing state property. Josh, you can appreciate this. I fought against us. I'm state property. How can I be stealing state property? Okay.
oh yeah.
That didn't fly. So I got an extra 2 months added to my good behavior sentence.
Well, let me just ask about that, the time itself in prison. Like, if you could say a word of what kind of characterizes, the people within the bars, like what would that word be? Like, what was the sense of the people's outlook on things?
Um, I would say a majority is just their outlook on life is dismal. And I mentioned that I saw the worst of everybody, the bad of the bad. And you know what? There were white collar people in there. There were blue collar. It didn't. There were educated people in there. They just made poor decisions, and that's where it ended. They ended up being. Um, the other thing is that once you're incarcerated, once you're in prison, I want to say the return rate is in the upper percentile. I want to say 90 some percent of once you've offended, you will return. And so I was in there with guys that had been in there 5 times and were getting ready to be released and said, I'll be out for 4 months and see you back here. And I'm like, Lord, I don't want to be that. I want to get out and live my life for you. And so I can remember on my last day, the night before I was due to be released, that the sergeant of the facility, it was a female sergeant. She's like, Paradise, she's like, I won't see you back here.
Oh, wow.
And
That's right.
I said, You're absolutely right, Sergeant. I am not coming back here because God's got some better things for me out there. So
So
uh,
what was it like, Barney? I mean, walking out into freedom again.
it was it was so weird because for 22 months I've been told when to get up and when to eat and what gates to walk through. And it's almost like you're a part of the cattle community. You go from this area to this area to this area, you do your job, you check in, and you're locked up. And so to be released, it was like, man, God, where do I go from here? Now I got a record. I want to say that if it wasn't for my parents loving me and giving me the grace and forgiving me for all the crap that I put them
Hmm.
through my poor decisions and drug and stealing from them and just not treating them with respect and honor that they deserve. But they were there for me when I got out. And if I didn't have that support, it would have been very tough to start over. And so I will tell you, when you're in prison, you kind of get this chip on your shoulder. Even even the best believer, even those who trust God, you have to like protect yourself in prison. And if you don't, then you're going to get walked over. And so even getting out of there, it took a little bit of time for me to shake it off. Like, what's that guy looking at? You better not be staring at me. And so it took me a little bit to get that chip off the shoulder. And God worked with me and said, you know what, you got love to give. Let's replace that chip on your shoulder with love and share about me.
So what did you do, Barney? I mean, you come out, you obviously didn't have any work. What in the world do you do?
you you think about, how do I keep making the right decisions? And so one of the first decisions I made was, I got to get grounded in a church. And so, like I mentioned, I never had that upbringing. My parents were raised Catholic. We were semi-raised Catholic, so we went to church once a year and we were good. So I remember my aunt, um, from my dad's brother, married my aunt Marlene, and she was always talking about Jesus, and she was always in church. So I gave her a ring and I said, Aunt Marlene, I'm out. I'm out of prison, and I love Jesus, and I know that you go to church, and I'd love to go with you. And so she took me to church, and that's how I that's the only thing I can do. I had to have support from family. I had to have somebody take me to the next step to say, here's where you go from here. Don't leave somebody that out there floundering alone, trying to figure it out on their own when they've come out of prison. We need help. We need a little assistance and guidance to make it to that next step or make it to that next level. So I was very thankful that my aunt was an influencer in my life for that period of time. That transition from being the bad boy, God changing you, and now stepping into goodness and wanting to do and serve at the church.
So that's the encouragement for family members too and friends. For your perspective is reach out to me,
Yeah,
like take me to that next step.
it absolutely. You know what? And that's one thing I'm gonna, tout on Gateway Church here. We have a phenomenal prison ministry. And in the state of Texas, we are in several prisons, and what we do is send out the weekend message. And there are men really being impacted within this ministry program. And so a lot of a discussion is like, how do we help them as they come out, of prison? I haven't been involved in that ministry. Oddly enough, Josh, going through all this, I have a zero tolerance for people who make poor decisions and start using drugs. And I, I'm like, God, help me give grace. But I'm like, are you stupid? Look how many times you keep messing up. And you should know that drugs lead down to a path of destruction, So I have very little tolerance for it. And
Well, probably because you've walked through the darkest valleys through it, and
yeah,
you see what they're. Maybe it's a more of an intolerance for like where they're going to end up and the
that's
frustration.
exactly it. I
Yeah.
love them as individuals, but when I share a truth with them, it's like, guys, you can't fool me. I've been there. Okay. I've been there. You've got to make a decision. You've got to make a choice to change your path and make right decisions. Because every time you choose drugs or you choose to get involved with this illegal element, it's going to take you down a road to despair and destruction. It just so happens that one of our staff members here at Gateway, uh, her son has been going through a lot of drug addiction and he's currently incarcerated. And I just asked, hey, would it help if I write him a letter? I know he doesn't know me, but you know what? I'm laying out the same testimony. Here's where I was, and here's how God changed me. And guess what? If you stop making the foolish decisions and recognize that you need to get rid of that drug that is taking you down the wrong road, you too can have a life that is abundant. And I say abundant, it's like, man, Jesus is real to me. I often, think about seeing the invisible. I mean, for some of your listeners here is like, man, he's talking about Jesus, but I've never met this Jesus. I don't understand what it is. He's not real to me. He's not around and on the news and doing things in life that are changing the world or impacting me. But in the spirit, God can, Jesus can change you. God can direct you. God can redirect your path that you were on to a new path. And that is what is so awesome to me. Josh, you being an attorney, a lot of people, will say, well, I don't believe in Jesus because I've never seen him and there's no facts. Well, if you think back in the Bible, there is witnesses, 5,000, 3,000 that saw this man that was dead and crucified and then came back to life and saw him after he had been brought back to life. That's a miracle. There is written testimony that should be able to stand up in a court of law. And yet we have people in our society today saying, I don't believe it. Well,
Yeah,
there's proof.
that would do well in court. The eyewitness testimony. And
Yeah, exactly.
well, looking back to that time, like and you've answered this, but I just want you to talk about it for a minute. Where was God through the whole prison experience? Like, where was Jesus in the whole experience for you? Did he leave you?
He never left me. I I didn't even know. Like sometimes I'm like, wow, this was just thinking back, it's such a distant memory. And I equate it to like when you have a scar, like I broke my collarbone about 5 years ago, and I have a scar there. And so I know that the pain I endured and I went through is there, but it's been covered up. And so thinking back through my prison years, I know there was a lot of frustration and like, oh my gosh, am I going to live through this day? Or is there going to be a riot? And I'm going to be caught in the middle. Am somebody going to, shank me or stab me because I looked at them wrong or I disrespected them? I was just protected from all that. And what I mean by protected, I was like, I went in and I went in the highest level threat that you could because they process you through that. So I was on a level 3 yard with murderers and rapists and stuff like that. And I can remember the first day in there was a riot and percussion grenades going off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord, what's going on? And then so I was there a few days and then they processed me down to a level 2 yard, which was still no fun, no joy in that. There was some big mean dudes in there that I didn't want to tangle with. And So finally, they recognized I was a non-violent offender, and I went down to a level 1 yard. And I got placed in what's called the maintenance dorm. So typically there's 60 guys in a dorm. I got placed in one that there was 22 guys in a dorm, and they all had special privileges. So as I was waiting to get placed for my job role, they just took a liking to me, and I happened to believe that that was God impressing his spirit to say, this is my son. I want you to look out for him because he's going to be utilized. He's going to be used in the future to proclaim my name and to be used for mighty things. And so I was blessed in there. I was protected. These guys that had a lot of what we call clout in there, they protected me. They got me one of the best jobs in the whole prison complex. I worked for second in command, third in command. There was the warden and the assistant warden, and then I worked for the director of operations, taking care of all the maintenance and facilities and construction in the office environment. So I just, again, I was well protected, and I was thankful. And I was one of the highest paid inmates in that prison. I made a whopping 30 cents an hour. Guys, I was
Wow.
rolling in the pennies, okay?
Well, I know your role now in your story, and just to hear that you were put doing the construction and the maintenance and the operations for the facility is just fascinating. But catch us up now. So I don't want to. I appreciate you sharing that. So you get out, and thank goodness for the Aunt Marlene's of the world.
Yes.
And then what did you do for work? Like,
I got into in fact, my aunt gets me into church, and I meet a couple of guys there that own a construction company, and shared my testimony and said, hey, well, why don't you come work for us and talk about second chances, because a lot of felons are like, oh man, got to stay away from them. They gave me opportunity. They trained me. They eventually I worked up to be, a job foreman for their construction company. And so God just kind of kept this construction element in my wheelhouse. And so I was very thankful from there. From the construction element, I went into manufacturing of display systems. I moved up, met my first wife, and her father gave me a job up in Nevada, and he would build display systems for Christian bookstores and video stores and things like that. So that's where I got my first taste of really serving in the Christian world. And through that process, I became a designer. I would design retail stores and church bookstores and cafes, and have dabbled in restaurant design and dentist offices and things like that. So God was preparing me all this time to be called to Gateway. And so I'm just thankful for even that transition, that everything he has done in my career and developing me, but most importantly, kind of growing me as a believer. Sometimes we get so immersed in learning the Bible that we forget just the simplicity of the Bible. And so, Josh, you and I had some opportunity to talk about the Bible and just read through some of God's word and just talk about it in its simplistic format. And really, that's what it comes down to, is the simplicity of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Hey, guess what? He loves you, and he has made opportunity for you to join his family. And that's what I recognized that day so many years ago, where I'm like, man, I've blundered it. I have messed up over and over, and I have an extended hand of love and grace, and that is through Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, by God the Father sacrificing his own son. And I know, it's kind of hard to understand that, but that is the path of redemption. That's what brings us back to this loving Father that we were separated from. And I'm just so thankful that there was an avenue to pluck me out of this path of destruction, to put me on a path of goodness and fruit. You know what I live for now? Not distributing evil and wrongdoing, but I want to distribute love,
Yeah.
God's love. I want people to know, hey, he does care. Life isn't a bowl of cherries and, flowers, but you know what? He cares. When things are really tough, he cares. He's there. When things are really good, he loves and cares. So that to me is God, is love.
What about, so I can hear the kind of the response sometimes of people of, he can't love me. Like I've done this, it's too bad. You know,
Mm.
through your whole journey or process, do you ever beat you up and guilt you about this? I mean, just talk about that a little bit because you could respond like, no, look what I've done.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great question, Josh, because I found it easiest to accept Jesus's forgiveness, to accept God's forgiveness of what I've done. I found it very difficult for me to forgive myself for corrupting young kids and doing drugs. And I don't know what those drugs might have led to in their life, whether that was a lifelong addiction or even incarceration, or even in some cases may have been death. And I found it really hard to forgive myself for that despicable introduction of drugs into people's lives. And ultimately, God helped me to understand that, you know what, I am forgiven and I can forgive myself. And if my creator forgave me, then I should be okay with being forgiven and be able to walk in newness and make a difference. If I contribute to destroying 5 or 20 lives, then you know what? I'm redeemed, and I will give to impact and make a better life or influence a life of hundreds or thousands, that can make wise decisions based on the poor decisions that I've made in my life.
Well, that's kind of where he has you right now and what y'all are doing. I mean, at Gateway, but so catch us up. So you created a design firm, um, and work there in another design firm. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, I actually had opportunity to build a couple of design firms, very successful design firms in what we call the Christian industry, that primarily focused on growing, designing bookstores and music stores in the Christian industry. So worked in that for 20 years, and at one point Gateway was one of my clients that I used to work on their or design their bookstores and cafes. And an opening came about to grow it, from one campus to 9 and 10. And so that was my introduction into Gateway, helping them in the cafe retail type world, bookstore world, which then eventually brought me back to my true passion, and that's building, designing, building, creating spaces for people to come and experience the true love of God and intimate worship, within our buildings, our campuses. It's just a building until the people show up, because when the people show up, God shows up.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that. I mean, for a minute before time slips away on us, what what is Gateway's hope in all the building they're doing and in the future? What are y'all trying to craft in order to reach people? Because you guys are doing a lot of building.
Yeah, we are. I'm telling you, Gateway's mission is really to just to see people saved, delivered, set free, equipped, discipled, and building his kingdom. And so that's really what we want to do. We have some fabulous ministry elements that we have out there at the campuses, but also online. We give opportunities to serve, to hear God's word. Pastor Robert has a humongous following only because of God's blessing that he's seen on lots of television programs, on Daystar, on TVN, all across the world. And so one of Gateway's callings is not only to love and or share God's love in our community, but where can we share it outside our community? And so one of the biggest blessings is like, how can we give back? How can we help other churches do ministry better? So God has used Gateway from that standpoint as well. And then, speaking for our department, we're able to help and guide other churches on, hey, how do you do a construction project? How do you collaborate and organize between the physical of construction and the ministry aspect of getting teams involved and truly planning a campus or a building that is going to minister. So we are adamant about impacting lives. Gateway's tagline is we're all about people. We really are. No matter your color, creed, ethnic makeup, man or woman, or child, we are out. We want to show you God's love because He loves you so much.
And you want to build, from me looking in, you want to build um, uh, that things that impact and help the community. It's
Yeah.
not just about, a certain like big center or something. It's like you want to do stuff that the community is impacted and helped and loved on.
Oh, totally, totally. I mean, like, what's important to God? Families. We have a wonderful children's program. We have we partner with a lot of outside ministries as well. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of Embrace Grace, but we minister to single parents whenever we can. So it's really assessing the needs of the community and really putting ministry in place to be able to help them through. Just like I was helped and supported from my transition from incarceration to freedom, we want to help our communities, the people in our communities, transition from poor choices that they've made in their life, whether that's financial poor decisions, or maybe they're struggling with relationship or marriage. We want to help them through those struggles and put them on a path of what we call the blessed life. And that is one that is intimate with God and putting Him first in all our decisions.
That's so good, Barney. Well, gosh, thank you. Thank you all for your heart and what you're doing just at Gateway and sharing that story. I want to switch questions for a second with you. Tell me, so you're a grandfather of 10 grandkids. What do you see as your grandfather's role? Like, speak to some grandparents. Like, what do you see the importance of it? Have you considered that? Like, what do you
I
see your
really,
role in your grandkids?
I really have, Josh. I don't know if I ever shared with you, and I, I started jotting down an outline of a book that I want to write, and it's called The Legacy of Love. And I've mentioned love, several times throughout this. I believe God is love. And if we're created in His image, in Corinthians, it talks about if I can have all these gifts, but if I don't have love, I'm just a clanging gong. And so I really want to emulate God's love, not only to humanity, but through my kids, through my grandchildren. And so in this legacy of love, the thought was, as a child, you are born, and the love is your parents' love, and all that effort is given up to mom and dad. And if you're lucky enough, if you're blessed enough, you also learn about God during that time, and you accept Him, and that you walk with Him for the rest of your life. As you get older, you come into your teenage years, and you like, oh, hey, there's an opposite sex here that might get some of that love. And so some of that love is transferred from your parents, and ultimately you end up meeting your spouse, and that love is given to your spouse. And man, you might have been giving 100% to your parents, and now they're only getting 40%, and there's 60% to your spouse. And then guess what? Cycle starts all over, and you have kids. And now you've got to divide your love between your spouse and your kids, and your parents are like shoved off, and they get 10 to 12%, and everybody gets a lot more. And that's just God's cycle of love. Well, as a grandparent, guess what? You get to give love in the ways that you missed out or may not have known how to do it as you were parenting. And so it is a dynamic time, man. I'm telling you, to see all our grandkids, they all are so unique, just like our kids were, but we get a love on them at different times. And you always hear grandparents tease about, well, we get to love on them, spend time with them, and then we send them home. That really is the case. You can love and cherish on them, but you know what? You don't have to take care of them full time.
Yeah. Well, thanks for speaking about that. I bet you are a awesome grandfather.
I I try to be, but I'm telling you, if it wasn't for my wife bringing balance to us, she is just a phenomenal mother and grandmother. And just like my mom was the glue of the family, my wife really is. So I really have to take my cues from her of like, hey, balance your time. Don't go mountain bike riding. Don't
Yeah.
start a hobby of fly fishing. We need, family time with our grandkids.
Yeah.
So I'm thankful
Oh,
that she balances me.
well, if you had to say, and we can wrap it up here, Barney, if you had to say, this is my life message, like this is an encouragement to people, in a few words, and I'm surprised you with this question, what would that be? What would your encouragement to people? What would your life kind of message be for them?
Yeah. My life message is really it's broad. And what I mean by that is I believe I was put on this earth to bring joy, happiness, and share God's love to humanity. And I say humanity because there's not a stranger I've met in this world. And whether that's at a gas station or a restaurant, I'm going to smile at them and I'm going to say hi to them and strike up a conversation if time allows. And in that, I hope I have opportunity to share a little bit of my 2-minute testimony. I was a dirtbag. God loved me so much that he changed me. And guess what? I care about you enough to share it.
That is so good. There's so much from your story, Barney, and your testimony. I'm just grateful for the time. And I feel like your encouragement to young people and all people would be choices and people
Yeah.
you hang out with as well, but also that through the darkest times and the worst times, like Jesus is with you every step of the way, and you went from where you went to where you are now. It's an incredible story of transformation.
Yep. Yeah. I'm grateful that by God's strengthening that I never gave up, that in my darkest time of despair and locked away and my life was put on hold, that I didn't give up, that I am running the race. I'm not done with the race, but God has a lot of potential for me, and I'm not done. And I do want to do all that He's called me to do, and do it for Him, not for Barney's kingdom building or anything to give recognition to me. It's like, man, God is the one that deserves all the recognition. I just want to be able to say, He's the one that made me who I am. He's the one that I get up in the morning and want to serve and to help people know who He is and what He's about and the love and grace that He has for them.
That's so good, Barney. Hey, well, whenever you write your book, get to writing. We want to link it link it back to this. And thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing with people and how you love them, and then what Gateway is doing to impact everywhere they are at, and just being on the front lines in church ministry. So we're just grateful for you guys.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to share what God has done in my life.
Thanks, Barney. Have a great day.
Hey, this is Micah. Me and Josh would like to thank you for joining us in the Storyfield today. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion, and to learn more about us and the Storyfield, visit thestoryfield.com. This podcast is sponsored by the Allen Firm, legal guides for many of life's situations. To learn more about the Allen Firm, visit allenlawfirm.com. Have a blessed day, week, and year, and we will see you next time on the Storyfield.
This is Josh again. I just wanted to thank you for listening and let you know that this podcast is really about hope and about giving you hope for your life. So if you're listening and you're in a place where you're really feeling hopeless right now, or if you do not know Jesus, we have some great news to share with you and would love a chance to pray for you. Email us at hope@allenlawfirm.com. That's hope@allenlawfirm.com, and we'll reach out to you soon. Thank you for listening. God bless you.